everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Carrie. I'm Carrie Lazat, your Director of Cable and Community Relations here in Bloomfield Township, where we meet with those people who make Bloomfield Township a wonderful place to live, work, and play. And today, my first guest of the year is our treasurer, Michael Schostak. Welcome, Michael. Great to see you.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
And the employees, we all got some pretty good news the first of the year with our first paycheck that began, I think, January 3rd, that we all received a 5% increase.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it may feel like it happened just very quickly because I know that the trustees were trying to get it, some kind of change happening before the end of the year. Mm-hmm. But I guess let's back up and talk a little bit about why was the time now for an increase for employees?
Sure. So, Bloomfield Township is an organization that delivers services. And in order to deliver those services, we rely on employees. And so we're an employer just like any other public or private sector employer. And that means that we are beholden to the pressures of retaining our employees and attracting new employees, as there's always turnover, people retiring, et cetera. And so it's incumbent on the board to make sure that we know, where we stand as an employer and how we compensate our employees to be able to attract the best and retain, our great employees. And so last year, I believe it was in June, that the board began a project, a study of our compensation. And we hired a public sector compensation consultant to assist us in that. And we looked at comparable communities around us that and saw how they compensated their employees. We also did surveys of our employees to understand.
So this is a big process.
Yes.
I mean, this just didn't happen like you guys decided, you got together on your own and made this increase.
Of course not, no.
It started back in June, and I think that, if anybody wants to look, they could see that there were trustees meetings that happened.
Yes.
There were at least two presentations. One that was the initial, we want you to participate in the survey, and this is how it's going to work. And then the results of that survey, I think they were presented in November. And then the trustees took that information, and there was discussion among the department heads, and the report was distributed.
Yes.
Kind of it wasn't distributed, maybe it was kind of sent out to all
employees.
employees.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to be very transparent about it, and so we showed the compensation consultant made recommendations as to how we could improve things. And so it was presented to the board on November 11th, and then the board studied that data and met and ultimately decided to increase across the board wages by 5% effective January 4th of this year. And that consists of a 2.75% increase that the unions had in their contracts that they were entitled to April 1st of this year. So we pulled that forward to January, and then we added 2.25% in a one-time adjustment.
Right.
And that was how we arrived at the 5%.
So I think that, if you look at the report, and I believe that it was presented to the board, was that it was a 4% that would have been, I guess, the recommendation by the consultant, but then he wasn't considering all of the things that you need to consider as far as what benefits cost. And I think that Jason was explaining something. Jason is our finance director, and he was talking about how it came in at like 80%. Can you explain a little bit more what Jason was trying to explain to me?
Well, he was referencing that, as an employer, we've got to decide where we want to pay. And so we have a range of what comparable communities around us are paying for various positions. And we had to decide, do we want to be at the top? Do we want to be more? Do we want to be 50% of what other people pay? And so we ultimately decided to set a base threshold of about 80% of average compensation based on the comparable communities, with the ability to move up through steps and merit increases.
Right. And I think that some people, some departments or some unions may want to be at 75% of salary, but 85% for benefits. So that there's flexibility now because you did the 2.25% instead of the 4%.
Yeah, so that gave us the flexibility as we go into negotiations for our next union contracts to be able to look at compensation holistically and say, okay, how much do we want to spend on wages versus how much benefits, how much retirement? That's a very important factor as well, how much we invest in our employees' retirements. And so all of those factors can be looked at together, and we can, work out, what's best.
Okay. And so I think you talked about a COLA increase. So can you just remind all of our
COLA
viewers?
stands for cost of living adjustment. And basically all that means is it's an increase to compensate for inflation that employees are feeling and is not related to a merit increase or a promotion of any kind. It's simply, an adjustment to compensate for inflation.
Okay. Is this a good time to talk about our chart?
Sure.
Okay.
So, one of the things we wanted to reference here in what I put together was that our employees over the last 15 years have lagged behind not just inflation, but also, on a nationwide basis.
So we're the gray line down here.
So the gray line is
at
the Bluefield Township employees, and the blue line represents overall wage growth, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the orange line represents the public sector median wages, wage growth. And it's important to note that as the township, struggled through the recession of 2008 through 2011, our employees received 0 raises for 5 years. And it was only starting in I believe, 2013 that any raises were increased, and they've gradually been so. Our employees, especially our wages, I should say, not specific employees, our wages have really lagged behind over the last 15 years. And, as an employer, we've got to compete. And so we need to be mindful of that.
And we were losing employees, and we're not being able to hire because we're not competitive.
Yeah, I would say we have had more difficulty recruiting new employees than we have losing employees. But we are seeing a lot of retirements. Our workforce is definitely a tenured workforce, and so as we look to backfill those retirements, we've been having some difficulties, and that's across the board, whether it's in public safety or administration.
Right, but we have lost employees to other cities and townships because we have lost some because we haven't been able to pay enough. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So not to put you on the spot there, but I just want to make sure that we are, we're being transparent about everything. So, so what other expenses are we forecasting for the township? Because I know there's a lot of big plans ahead. So, what are some of those plans that we need to? We've been saving money for. I don't want to say a rainy day, but we've been kind of putting money aside.
Yeah.
And
so we've got a really robust 5 and 10 year projection. So we're looking at everything from personnel costs to utilities to maintenance and operations and our capital needs. And that means replacing aging equipment, whether it's a fire truck or a police car or a plow truck. There's a lot of equipment that we maintain that we need to that we need to refresh, and so we have a projection about all of those requirements.
And Township Hall, do we want to talk a little bit about what that is? Because I think that is the plans have been created, or at least there's a draft of what the plans would create, and that's not something that we can fund out of our current budget.
Right. So there's some consideration about what is Township Hall and the campus look like going forward.
Because all of our buildings are pretty old. I know
All
that
of the buildings are
we
very
are
old.
celebrating here in the cable department. We're celebrating 40 years
Mm-hmm.
of being in operation, and there really haven't been a lot of updates, and it still kind of feels like you're walking back in time. And
Yeah.
I know Township Hall is also reflective of that, in that it grew, but it's kind of a hodgepodge of how it was put together. And there's some areas of the building that are really warm, and some areas that are cold, and there's not enough facilities for the police department. So this is really the need for
Yeah.
a new, new buildings.
Yeah. So another consultant that we hired last year was a special architect that works with public sector clients, governments, especially local governments, to assess what our space needs are. And that, again, he looked at the fire department, he looked at the police department, and then all of, Township Hall. And, we're currently in the process of digesting those results and thinking about what the next best step is. Of course, any changes to our facilities will be a expensive proposition and would probably not be anything that we could fund out of our ordinary cash flow. And so, something like that, we would probably look to financing. But
In financing, so if you can explain to I guess people who aren't treasurers, or that's are other ends of the communication spectrum that want more of a story. So I guess in financing that's kind of related to our credit rating, right?
Yes.
And so because we have this AAA credit rating, that's when we hope that's continued. If you can explain how does the credit rating achieve, and then how does that benefit us?
So the credit rating is provided by a national ratings agency. Currently we're rated AAA by Standard & Poor's, which is the same agency that rates banks and corporations and all of that. They look at everything from our expenses, our cash flow, our capital base, our equipment, infrastructure, and our management practices, and how we budget and how we account for things. They look at our audits. And so having a AAA credit rating, which is, of course, the highest possible rating, and we're one of the few municipalities in the state to have a
Really? Is
AAA.
that true?
Yes.
So I did not know that.
Yes.
So that's why you guys like to see a press release, and we tout that as one of our
Yes.
accomplishments.
We are one of the few
okay, well, that's
local
great.
governments. I mean, Oakland County is AAA rated, as an example, as I'm sure there are a couple other counties that are.
Yeah.
But we are one of the few local governments that have a AAA rating. And so that really speaks to, again, the strength of our financials and the soundness of our management practices and how we do things, how we budget, having a 10-year projection, and the level of debt that we currently have, that we do not have a significant amount of debt as compared to our fund balance or our, taxable base.
And then, so if we were to bond or get a loan for a building project, a massive building project, the loan that we would get is less.
The cost of it would be less. Yes, the interest rate would be lower.
Okay.
So next month, we're going to be going to market for bonds to finance the South Bloomfield Highlands Water Project. That's a $5 million offering. We're anticipating, again, a AAA rating, and we will be able to get the lowest possible interest rate on those bonds, which, of course, we pass on to our residents, who in this case, they have a special assessment to fund those water improvements. And that assessment will pay back the bond. And so having a lower interest rate because of the AAA is a direct benefit to our residents.
So any idea, is that happening 25, 26, 27? When do you think that might happen? Any ideas?
The bonds?
The bond, yeah.
For South Bloomfield Highlands?
For building.
Oh,
for building. No idea.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still in discussions.
It's still in discussions. Yeah. We have to come up with a plan first, and we're looking at all sorts of different options right now about how to,
Lots of balls in the air
Yeah,
right
lots
now.
of
Lots
balls.
of things
Yes,
going on.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
and I know that contract negotiations, that's like another, because of the compensation study, because we're still behind, we need to evaluate different positions. That's starting to happen now too.
Yes.
So fire department, or fire is first in line because their contract was expired.
Well,
and
they
then-
expire,
they
at March 31st.
Okay.
So we are in negotiations with the fire department, to the fire union, to our firefighters, to come up with a new contract.
Okay.
And
And they've already started that discussion. Yeah.
We've been meeting and talking, and so I'm optimistic that we're going to have something in place by March 31st.
Okay. For the new fiscal year.
Well, and when their contract
Yes.
expires.
Okay.
So that April 1st, they would have a new contract, and that's what we're working towards. And so, and like I said, I'm optimistic that we can get there. The other unions, and we have 7 other unions, expire March 31st of next year. And so, but in light of, the compensation study and where we're at, we have offered an opportunity to the other unions to meet with us and look to, come up with a new contract early. And we would be able to address all of those items regarding compensation, as I mentioned, not just wages, but also benefits, healthcare, retirement,
Okay.
et cetera.
So does it keep you up at night? Do you worry about where's the money going to come from and how we're going to pay for all this stuff? Because we've had a couple really good years now. And so how long can we sustain this, do you think?
Right. So, Michigan law caps how much property tax revenue can go up. And so one of the consequences of the high inflation in 22 and 23 was that, or was it 23 and 24, was that, property tax revenue went up a lot. And so we've had that money, and we have, prudently invested it and haven't, spent it frivolously or anything. But we expect that as inflation has come down and will continue to go down, hopefully, that also means, that our property tax revenue will increase, slightly, won't go up by as much. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so it causes us to be very careful with how we budget and how we spend money, and making sure that, we're purposeful with everything that we spend money on, and that we, look for cost-saving opportunities wherever we can.
What is frivolous spending in a city or a township? What could that possibly be? Because I really don't think I've seen any of that go on here.
We don't have that here.
So somewhere else, somewhere else, what would they?
Well, I mean, I don't want to call anybody out, but spending money on things that okay, I'll give you an example of how we're not doing it, which is another project that we started last year is we're going to be giving a makeover to the Township Hall Auditorium.
Yes.
Right? And you're spearheading that project.
Right. Yes.
And we have been very careful about how much we spend and what we spend it on. We're getting, very, reasonably priced but comfortable chairs for the audience.
Right.
We're not tearing apart and doing anything crazy. But again, frivolously, we could have approached it and said we're going to spend $1 million to redo our Township Hall Auditorium, and that would have been, in my opinion, frivolous.
I know. I think that well, I don't want to say art, music, and entertainment. Like those seem to be, I mean, that is for me like the reason for living. And I think it's interesting. So we gave out our new Heart of the Community Awards, and they were glass sculptures that tiny ones that were created. And when we went to the studio, which is just over the border in Pontiac, they were giving us a tour of the facility, and they said, I can't remember, it's not in Michigan, but there is somewhere further west where they do a 1% of their budget goes towards art installations for their community, so that they can make it a pretty beautiful place when you enter their campus. And I just thought that was an interesting way to allocate some of the funds. So I'll just give that. That's just an idea I might have. But we do what we can here in the cable department to
Yeah.
make things fun and nice. And I think that's one of our strategic plans as far as like what the plans came back with. People want gathering spaces and things where they can come together. So I will continue to try and add the fun.
Yeah, I mean, and that was certainly something that came out of the strategic planning process, which was another big project we did last year to understand how we can go forward. And a lot of that is going to drive our budgeting as well. You know, what are we going to spend money on? And, you know, the other big thing, as you and I have talked about, is, you know, 2 years from now will be our bicentennial as a community.
Yeah.
And we're going to begin talking about that and what are we going to do to commemorate that. And, you know,
because we want to have fun.
we do.
Right? And bring our community together.
Maybe we should have a lavish black tie ball.
Oh, I'm all for that.
For the community.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, any other further
Well,
thoughts?
we wouldn't spend taxpayer money on that, so.
No. No, of course not.
But no, we're going to come up. We are definitely going to celebrate
in an appropriate way.
in an appropriate way,
Okay.
not frivolously. Our 200th birthday
Yes.
as a community. So
All right.
yes,
Well, thank you, Michael. And I know once we get further along in contract negotiations and as other things pop up, we'll have you back so that you can help explain. And maybe, I know you used to teach economics, but I think little reminders from time to time help those of us who haven't had an economics class in like 30 years. So thank you for
Of
joining
course.
me. And thank you all for watching. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me right there. Is my email address, or you can also send Michael a contact, an email as well. And we're here to answer any questions you might have. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
thank you.